Have you ever looked at someone and been absolutely certain you knew their story? Yeah. Me too. And this story I'm about to tell you, it wrecked me. Because it proves that we look at the world through dirty lenses. Dirty with prejudice, dirty with arrogance, dirty with that stupid certainty that we understand people just by glancing at them. This is the story of a woman named Teresa. And a man the world called a billionaire. And I need you to pay very close attention, because the ending of this story will change the way you see every single person who crosses your path from today on. Teresa was 37 years old. Rough hands, short nails, skin weathered by sun and wind. Every single day, at 4:30 in the morning, 4:30, when you're still buried in your warm sheets, she was already up. She'd light the old stove, the one that only worked on the left burner because the right one was clogged with grease. And right there, in that kitchen smaller than a bathroom in a studio apartment, she'd start making candy. Fudge bites. Caramel chews. Peanut brittle. Coconut clusters. Little pralines wrapped in cellophane. Each piece cost $1.50. $1.50. Do the math with me. To pay the $600 rent on a one-bedroom in the back of a building in East Baltimore, the kind of neighborhood people only mention on the news for the wrong reasons, Teresa needed to sell 400 pieces of candy a month just to keep a roof over her head. 400 pieces. Not counting electricity. Not counting water. Not counting the gas she used to make the candy in the first place. Not counting food for her and her son. Because Teresa had a son. Miguel, 8 years old. A quiet kid, the kind who speaks little but observes everything. Miguel had a notebook. A beat-up notebook with the cover peeling off that he carried everywhere like it was treasure. And in that notebook, Miguel drew houses. Big houses with yards, pools, garages. Houses he'd never set foot in. Houses he saw through the bus window when his mom took him downtown. And under every drawing, in that crooked handwriting kids have, he wrote the same thing, Mom's house. Teresa pretended she didn't see it. But she saw. And every time she did, she swallowed a knot in her throat and went back to the stove. Because crying didn't pay bills. Crying didn't put food on the table. Crying was a luxury Teresa couldn't afford. Her routine was always the same. Wake up at 4:30. Make candy until 7. Get Miguel ready for school. Walk him there, 20 minutes on foot. Walk back home. Wrap everything up. Load the candy into a cooler with a strap made of twine. And go out. Every day. Rain or shine. Sick or aching. She'd go out. She sold outside the subway station at Penn Station in downtown Baltimore. If you've ever been through a big city station at rush hour, you know what it's like. A sea of people moving fast, nobody looks at anybody, everyone in a hurry, everyone with a face that says they didn't sleep enough. And right there in the middle of that human avalanche was Teresa. Cooler on her hip. Offering candy to anyone who passed. Most people didn't even look. They walked right past her like she was a traffic cone, a lamppost, a thing without life sitting in the way. Some made that face, you know the one. The "no thanks" face that actually means, get out of my way. Others grabbed a piece, tossed the coins into her hand without touching her skin, like poverty was contagious. Teresa took it all in silence. Because she'd learned something very early in life, pride doesn't fill stomachs. And she had a stomach to fill besides her own. But there were hard days. Days when she came home with half the candy still in the cooler. Rainy days, cold days, days when the trains broke down and the station emptied out. On those days, she ate the leftover candy for dinner. Fudge for dinner. And she'd tell Miguel it was because she liked it. Mom loves fudge, baby. And Miguel would smile and believe her. Or pretend to believe her. Because kids understand far more than we think. Now I need to introduce you to another character. And this is where the story starts to get strange. His name was Richard Mendez. 52 years old. Owner of a corporate group called Mendez Capital. 7 companies. 2,300 employees. Estimated net worth of $1.8 billion. Billionaire. For real. The kind who shows up on the Forbes list. Richard was the type of man magazines love to put on covers. Tailored suit. Silver hair slicked back. A watch on his wrist that cost more than Teresa's entire apartment. Armored car. Private driver. Office on the 28th floor of a glass tower in Midtown Manhattan. View of the entire city. And he looked down at that city every single day. Every day. Coffee in hand, suit impeccable, looking at New York like it belonged to him. And in a way, it did. Because when you have $1.8 billion, the city works differently for you. Traffic? Helicopter. Lines? Don't exist. Restaurant packed? There's always a table. Hospital? Private suite. The city bends for people with money. And Richard knew it. He grew up poor, at least that's what he told interviewers. Son of a factory worker, raised in Newark, went to public school. The classic self-made man story. Climbed through sweat, brains, and opportunity. And now he was at the top. The question is, what happens to someone who stays at the top for too long? Richard had everything. Literally everything money can buy. And maybe precisely because of that, he felt an emptiness that no extra zero in his bank account could fill. But that he never mentioned in interviews. That he kept to himself. On an ordinary day in March, a gray Tuesday, the kind where the city looks like a black and white photograph, Richard did something he hadn't done in years. He went down. Not by helicopter. Not in the armored car. He just went down. Told the driver he was going to walk. The driver thought it was strange. The security detail got nervous. But Richard insisted. He wanted to walk. Feel the ground. Breathe that polluted air he'd forgotten existed. And he walked out into the city. No destination. Just walking. And walking, he ended up at the Penn Station subway exit. And that's where he saw Teresa for the first time. She was in her usual corner. Cooler on her hip. Offering candy. And Richard stopped. Not because he wanted candy. He didn't even eat sugar, his nutritionist had banned it. He stopped because something about that woman caught his attention. Maybe it was the way she held the cooler. Firm, but not aggressive. Maybe it was the smile. A tired smile, but real. Or maybe, and this is the version I believe, maybe Richard saw in that woman something he'd lost a long time ago. Something all the money in the world never brought back. He stood there, watching. And Teresa noticed. Looked at him. And offered, "Candy, sir? Fudge, caramel, coconut. Everything's $1.50. Richard walked closer. Looked at the candy. Looked at her. And said something strange. He said, "How long have you been selling candy here?" Teresa thought the question was odd. Nobody asked that. People either bought or didn't. Nobody wanted the story. But she answered, "About 6 years." 6 years? Every day. Every day. Except Sunday. I rest on Sunday. Richard went quiet. Looked at the candy again. Picked up a piece of fudge. Put it in his mouth. Chewed slowly. And said, "It's good." She smiled. "Thank you." He pulled out his wallet. Teresa expected a $2 bill. Maybe a 5 if the man was generous. Richard pulled out 100. Held it out to her. Teresa's eyes went wide. "Sir, I don't have change for 100. Don't need change. But, keep it." And he left. Just like that. Turned around and disappeared into the crowd. Teresa stood there with a $100 bill in her hand, not quite understanding what had just happened. She tucked the money away. Sold the rest of the candy. Went home. Told Miguel, "A generous man showed up today, baby." And Miguel, in that quiet way of his, asked, "Is he coming back?" Teresa laughed. "Of course not, Miguel. People like that show up once and vanish." But she was wrong. Richard came back the next day. Same time. Same place. Bought a caramel chew this time. Left another 100. And this time, he stayed longer. Asked more questions. Where do you live? East Baltimore. That's far. Hour and a half on the bus. And your son? Where does he go to school? Public school near the house. Good student? Gets good grades. Loves to draw. Richard listened to everything carefully. And left again. On the third day, he came back. The fourth. The fifth. The sixth. A full week. Always bought a piece, always left $100, always asked questions. And Teresa started getting suspicious. Because let's be honest, a man in an expensive suit, flashy watch on his wrist, coming every day to buy candy from a street vendor and leaving $100? That's not normal. Teresa had lived her whole life in rough neighborhoods. Learned early on that nobody gives anything for free. That every favor has a price. That when something seems too good to be true, it usually is. So on the seventh day, when Richard showed up again, Teresa didn't smile. She looked at him with a serious face and said, "Sir, what do you want from me?" Richard seemed surprised. "What do you mean? You've been coming here every day, buying candy, leaving $100. I'm not stupid. What do you want?" Richard was silent for a moment. And then he said something Teresa didn't expect. "I want to make you a proposal." Teresa's heart went cold. Proposal. She knew that word. She knew what it meant when a rich man said proposal to a poor woman. She felt disgust. She felt rage. She wanted to throw the cooler in that man's face and scream that she was a mother, that she had dignity, that she wasn't for sale. But before she could do anything, Richard continued, "I want you to work for me." Teresa blinked. "Work? Yes. I'm opening a new division in my company. Corporate catering. Meals and snacks for businesses. And I need someone who knows real food. Not a chef trained in Paris. Someone who knows how to make good food with whatever they have. Someone like you." Teresa didn't believe it. Literally didn't believe it. Thought it was a scam. Thought it was a prank. Thought there was a hidden camera somewhere. "Sir, I sell candy on the street. I don't know anything about running a business. You know how to make great food. You know how to wake up early. You know how to work hard. You know how to deal with people. We can teach the rest. But the salary would be $5,000 a month. With full benefits. Transportation stipend. Meal allowance. Health insurance for you and your son. $5,000. Teresa sold candy on the street, and in the good months, the best months, she pulled in $1,200. $1,200 working 12 hours a day, Monday through Saturday, in sun, rain, and cold. And this man was offering $5,000. With health insurance. For her and Miguel. She wanted to cry. She wanted to hug that man. She wanted to kneel right there on the sidewalk and thank God in front of everyone. But Teresa was Teresa. And Teresa had learned that when something seems too good to be true. "Why me?" she asked. "You don't know me. There are thousands of more qualified people. Why me?" Richard smiled. A different smile from the ones she'd seen before. A smile that was sad? No, not sad. It was nostalgic. Like he was looking at someplace very far away, very long ago. And he said, "Because you reminded me of someone." And he left. Again. Without explaining anything else. Teresa went home that night with her head spinning. Couldn't sleep. Sat on the bed staring at the ceiling, thinking. $5,000. Full benefits. Health insurance. But what if it was a lie? What if it was one of those schemes to exploit vulnerable people? What if she went there and ended up worse than before? What if? 1,000 what ifs. Miguel appeared at the bedroom door. "Mom, are you okay?" "I'm fine, baby. Go back to bed. You're worried." It wasn't a question. It was a statement. The 8-year-old reading his mother like an open book. Teresa sighed. Miguel, if someone offered you something really good, something that could change our lives, but you didn't understand why, would you take it? Miguel thought. With that absurd seriousness kids sometimes have. And answered, Mom, you always say God sends things at the right time. Maybe it's the right time. Teresa looked at her son. 8 years old. And wiser than her. The next morning, Teresa went back to the station. But not to sell candy. She went looking for Richard. And he was there. Waiting. As if he knew she'd come. I accept, she said. But I have conditions. Richard raised his eyebrows. Conditions. I want a contract. A real one. On the books. I want to see the place where I'll be working before I start. And if at any point I feel like something's off, I'm out. No questions. Richard smiled again. That strange smile. Fair. Come with me. And that's when what Teresa would later call the turning point began. Richard took her to the Mendez Capital offices. On the subway. He insisted on taking the subway with her. The billionaire on a packed New York subway car, in his suit, squeezed between students, workers, and people carrying grocery bags. Teresa almost laughed at the absurdity. When they arrived at the building, that enormous glass tower in Midtown, all mirrored panels, Teresa felt her legs tremble. She'd never stepped inside a place like that. The lobby had marble floors. The walls had massive paintings. There was a smell of expensive perfume in the air. And everyone in suits, in heels, in beautiful clothes. And there she was. In a faded t-shirt, worn jeans, beat-up sneakers. She felt shame. A heavy shame, the kind that presses on your chest. But Richard walked beside her like it was the most normal thing in the world. Greeted employees. Introduced Teresa. This is Teresa. She's going to lead the new corporate catering project. Lead. He said lead. Teresa almost choked. The employees looked at her with that face, you know which one. The "who is this?" mixed with "has the boss lost his mind?" face. But nobody said a word. Because when the man who owns $1 billion speaks, nobody questions. At least not to his face. Richard showed her the space that would be the industrial kitchen. Brand new equipment. Professional stoves. Huge refrigerators. Stainless steel counters. Everything gleaming. Teresa looked at it all like someone looking at a spaceship. All of this is for me? It's for the project. And the project is yours. But I don't know how to use any of this. My stove has 2 burners and one's broken. Richard laughed. A real laugh, loose and free. We're going to train you. You'll have food safety classes, kitchen management courses, everything. But the recipes are yours. And that's how it started. Teresa signed the contract. For real. On paper. With a tax ID, retirement contributions, everything by the book. And on her first day of work, she woke up at 4:30 in the morning, like always. But this time, instead of lighting the old stove, she put on a white uniform. Clean. Pressed. With her name embroidered on the chest. Teresa. Miguel looked at his mom in that uniform and said, "Mom, you look like a doctor." She laughed, "A doctor of fudge, baby." And she went to work. The first months were hard. Very hard. Teresa knew nothing about administration. Didn't know how to make a spreadsheet. Didn't know corporate vocabulary. When someone mentioned cash flow, she thought there was a plumbing problem. When they asked for a KPI report, she thought it was some kind of medical exam. The other employees noticed. And some, not all, but some, made a point of showing it. Whispers in the hallway. Comments in a low voice that were just loud enough for her to hear. The boss's charity case. Plucked her off the subway and dropped her here. I bet she doesn't last 3 months. Teresa heard all of it. And swallowed it. Just like she swallowed the humiliation of people walking right past her on the sidewalk. Just like she swallowed the shame of eating fudge for dinner. Swallowing was what she did best. But this time she swallowed with anger. A good anger. An anger that turned into fuel. She studied at night. After Miguel fell asleep, Teresa would sit at the kitchen table with the books the company gave her and study. Basic administration. Excel. Health codes. Technical cooking terms. She didn't understand half of what she read. But she read. And reread. And took notes. And asked questions the next day. Asked without shame. Because she'd been embarrassed enough in life to know that the real shame isn't not knowing. The real shame is pretending you know and getting it wrong. And little by little, Teresa learned. And more than learning, she delivered. Her recipes were a hit. The employees at the companies they catered for couldn't stop praising her. The gourmet fudge she created, with 70% dark chocolate and a hint of espresso, became a sensation. Her creamy cornbread won an internal award. The sweet potato croquettes she invented became the most requested snack on the menu. Teresa had no diploma. No formal training. No culinary pedigree. But she had something no school teaches. She had hunger. Not hunger for food, she knew that kind all too well. Hunger to prove. To herself, to her son, and to everyone who thought a street candy vendor couldn't amount to anything. Richard watched everything from a distance. Didn't hover, didn't micromanage. He'd show up every now and then, taste something, smile that strange smile, and leave. And Teresa found it odd. Because he was the owner. The billionaire. The guy who had everything. And he seemed satisfied? No. Satisfied isn't the word. He seemed relieved. As if her being there resolved something inside him that Teresa couldn't understand. 6 months passed. The corporate catering project grew. From 2 companies served in the first month, it jumped to 12. Then 25. The numbers were excellent. And Teresa, the woman who sold candy for $1.50 at the subway station, was now managing a team of 14 people. 14 people reported to her. She who had never been in charge of anyone in her life, who had always been the one who obeyed, who kept her head down, who said, "Yes sir," and "No ma'am," was now the boss. And she was good at it. You know why? Because she treated the team the way she always wanted to be treated. With respect. With patience. With the dignity the world denied her for 37 years. When someone made a mistake, she didn't yell. She sat beside them and showed them how to do it. When someone was upset, she noticed, because people who've suffered a lot develop a radar for other people's pain. When someone needed to leave early, she let them. Go take care of your stuff, we'll hold it down here. The team loved her. And it wasn't that forced love born of fear. It was real respect. The kind earned day by day, in the trenches, sweating together. Teresa's life changed. Her salary went up. Richard gave her a raise without her asking. From $5,000 to $7,500. She moved out of East Baltimore. Rented a small but nice apartment in Canton. 2 bedrooms. Miguel finally had a room of his own. And on the first night in the new apartment, Miguel grabbed the old notebook, the beat-up one with the cover peeling off, and drew the apartment. Underneath he wrote, "Mom's house." But this time, it was real. Teresa looked at that drawing and cried. Cried for the first time in years. Cried out everything she'd swallowed. Every humiliation, every shame, every night of fudge for dinner, every "no thanks" said with disgust, every look of contempt from above. She cried. And when she finished crying, she wiped her face and said to herself, never again. Never again would she eat candy for dinner. Never again would she be invisible. Never again. But life has a cruel way of reminding you that you're never safe. That the line between peace and chaos is thin as a strand of hair. And that when everything finally seems to be in place, that's exactly when the ground disappears. It had been exactly 1 year since Teresa started at Mendez Capital. 1 year to the day. And that morning, Richard sent a message asking her to come to his office. Not the kitchen office. His office. On the 28th floor. Teresa had never been up there. The elevator was different from the others. Required a code. The doors opened and she stepped into a world that didn't feel real. Richard's office was the size of her entire old apartment in East Baltimore. Dark hardwood floors. Shelves lined with books. Paintings on the walls that probably cost more than she'd earn in a lifetime. And that view. All of New York at his feet. Richard was sitting behind the desk. But he was different. No suit. Just a simple shirt, unbuttoned at the collar. No watch. And his hair, usually immaculate, was messy. Like he'd run his hands through it too many times. "Sit down, Teresa." She sat. And she could tell something was wrong. Richard wasn't looking at her. He was looking at the desk. At his hands. There was a folder in front of him. A thick brown folder full of papers. "Teresa, I need to tell you something." The tone was different. It wasn't the confident billionaire's tone. It was the tone of a man carrying something heavy. Very heavy. And about to let it go. "A year ago, when I found you at the subway station, I said you reminded me of someone. You remember?" Teresa nodded. "I never told you who." Silence. Richard opened the folder. Pulled out a photograph. Old. Yellowed. And pushed it across the desk toward Teresa. Teresa picked up the photo. And the world stopped. In the photo, a woman. A woman with a cooler propped on her hip. Selling candy in front of a subway station. Rough hands. Short nails. Tired smile. The woman in the photo wasn't Teresa. But she could have been. The resemblance was terrifying. "Who is this woman?" Teresa asked, her voice trembling. Richard looked at her. And for the first time, Teresa saw something she never expected to see in a billionaire's eyes. Tears. "That's my mother." Teresa felt the air leave her lungs. "My mother's name was Donna Aparecida. Everyone just called her Tsida. She sold candy on the street. Exactly like you. Same cooler. Same smile. Same corner, Teresa. The same corner at the Penn Station exit." Richard stood up. Walked to the window. Turned his back to her, looking at the city below. And began to tell the story. "My father worked at a factory in Newark. That's true, I tell that in interviews. What I don't tell, is that my father drank. Drank a lot. And when he drank, he hit. Hit my mother. Hit me. My mother took the beatings in silence. Because she thought she had no choice. Because she thought a wife has to endure. Because my father's paycheck covered rent and without it we'd be on the street." Richard's voice cracked. He took a deep breath and continued. "When I was 10, my mother made a decision. She packed our things in a garbage bag, because we didn't even own a suitcase, took my hand and left. In the middle of the night. While my father was passed out drunk on the couch. We went to an aunt's place in East Baltimore." Teresa's eyes went wide. East Baltimore. "My aunt lived in a tiny room in the back of a building. My mother slept on the floor. I slept next to her. And the next morning, my mother woke up at 4:30 and started making candy." Richard turned around. Looked at Teresa. Fudge. Caramel chews. Coconut clusters. Peanut brittle. $1 each. She sold them at the Penn Station subway exit. Every day. Rain or shine. Sick or healthy. Because crying didn't pay the bills. The same words. Exactly the same words Teresa said to herself every day. "My mother raised me selling candy. She paid for my school clothes selling candy. Bought my first book selling candy. She had no education, no diploma, no nothing. All she had was her hands. And with her hands she made candy. And with candy she made my life." Richard returned to the desk. Sat down. Looked Teresa in the eyes. "When I was 17, I got a scholarship to a private university. Engineering. My mother cried all day. Out of happiness. She kept saying, "My son is going to be somebody." And I promised her, "Mom, one day I'm going to get you out of this life. One day you won't have to sell another piece of candy. One day you're going to live in a beautiful house, with a yard, with everything you deserve." Richard stopped. Swallowed hard. I graduated. Started working. Kept climbing. Earning more. The company kept growing. And with every promotion, every contract, every million that came in, I thought, it's almost time. It's almost time to keep the promise. But I always postponed. There was always one more deal to close. One more target to hit. One more project to deliver. I'd tell my mother, "Next month I'll take care of it, Mom. Next month." And she'd say, "Okay, son. Next month." Richard's voice was almost a whisper now. And next month became next year. And next year became, "When I get a chance." And, "When I get a chance," became never. Teresa felt her chest tighten. Because she knew what was coming. She knew before Richard said it. My mother died on a Tuesday. A gray Tuesday. She was selling candy at the station. Felt a pain in her chest. Sat down on the ground. Someone called an ambulance. But when the ambulance arrived, Richard couldn't finish the sentence. He didn't need to. Teresa was crying. Silently. Tears rolling down her face without any effort to hold them back. Massive heart attack. She was 53. 53 years old selling candy on the street. And I had 200 million in my account. 200 million. And his mother died selling dollar candy on a sidewalk. I wasn't there, Teresa. I was in Zurich. In a meeting. Closing an export deal that was going to net me another 50 million. When my phone rang, I saw the number and thought about not answering. Thought about it. Because the meeting was important. I almost didn't answer. But something made me pick up. And the voice on the other end said, "Richard, your mother." And my world ended. Richard opened a drawer. Took out an object. And placed it on the desk. It was a notebook. A beat-up notebook. With the cover peeling off. Teresa's heart nearly stopped. "When I was a kid," Richard said, "I had a notebook. And in that notebook I drew houses. Big houses. With yards. With pools. And under every drawing I wrote, Mom's house." Teresa covered her mouth with her hands. "I found this notebook in my mother's things. She kept it her whole life. Since I was 8 years old. 8 years old. Miguel's age. And right then, in that moment, holding that notebook, I understood. I understood that I'd spent my entire life building an empire to give my mother everything she deserved. And when I finally could, when I finally had enough money to buy the house with the yard, the pool, everything, she wasn't here anymore to receive it." Richard looked at Teresa with an intensity she'd never seen in anyone. "I bought the house, Teresa. The house I drew in that notebook when I was a kid. Exactly the same. With a yard. With a pool. With everything. And it's sitting there. Empty. Because the only person who should live in it will never be able to." Silence. A heavy, dense silence, the kind that hurts. Teresa wiped her tears and asked, "Is that why you came looking for me? Because of your mother?" Richard nodded. "The day I went out walking the city, it was exactly 10 years since she died. 10 years. And I went to the station. Went to the corner where she used to stand. I go there every year on that day. I just stand there, looking at the place where she used to be, and I saw you. With the cooler. In the same spot. With the same smile. And for 1 second, I swear to you, for 1 second, I thought it was her." His voice broke. "I know it wasn't. I know. But it felt like her. It felt like her. And I thought, I couldn't do anything for my mother. I was late. I was slow. I chose business, and when I came back to keep the promise, she was already gone. But what if I could do it differently? Not with her. With her I lost. But what if I could find someone like her, and this time not be late? Teresa understood. Understood everything. Every $100 bill. Every question. Every sad smile. Every time he looked at her with that nostalgic gaze. He wasn't hiring an employee. He was trying to fix the past. Trying to pay a debt that had no collector. Trying to say, "I'm sorry, Mom," through a stranger who carried the same cooler on the same corner. "I need you to know this," Richard said. "I need you to know why you're here. It wasn't charity. It wasn't pity. It was, I don't know the word. Redemption? Repair? I don't know. But I needed to do this. I needed to look at someone like my mother and this time be present. This time not be late." Teresa was quiet for a long time. She looked at the photo of Tsida. Looked at the old notebook. Looked at Richard. And then she said something he didn't expect. "Do you know what your mother would feel if she knew all this?" Richard didn't answer. "She'd feel proud. Not because of the billion. Not because of the company. Not because of the house with a pool. Proud because her son became a man who looks at a stranger selling candy on the street and sees a person. Because most people who walked past me every day, they didn't see me. I was invisible. An obstacle on the sidewalk. A nuisance. But you stopped. You looked. You asked my name." Richard bowed his head. "Your mother didn't die selling candy, Richard. Your mother died doing what she did best, taking care of her son. Even if her son wasn't there at that moment. Because every piece of candy she sold was to build the future that you built. She didn't fail. You didn't fail. Life is just too short for the plans we make." Richard cried. The billionaire cried. Right there, in the office on the 28th floor, overlooking the entire city, the man worth $1.8 billion cried like a 10-year-old boy who misses his mother. And Teresa let him. Because some pain doesn't need words. It needs space. It needs silence. It needs someone who understands that it's okay not to be okay. But this story doesn't end here. Because I said there was a plot twist. And the twist hasn't come yet. Everything I've told you so far is the lie. Not an actual lie. It's the story as the world saw it. The beautiful story. The story that makes you want to applaud. But the truth is something else. And the truth starts with a simple question. Why was Richard walking through the city that day? He said he wanted to walk. Wanted to feel the ground. That it was the anniversary of his mother's death. All true. But it wasn't the whole truth. Because on that gray Tuesday in March, Richard Mendez didn't go out for a walk. Richard Mendez went out to not come back. He had decided to kill himself. Right there. I know this is heavy. I know it changes everything. But stay with me. Nobody knew. Nobody had any idea. The billionaire. The man on the Forbes cover. The self-made success story. The example of achievement. He was destroyed inside. The marriage had fallen apart. His kids, 2 children from a 20-year marriage, weren't speaking to him. Not because they were ungrateful. Because he was never there. Always working. Always closing deals. Always prioritizing the next million. The same pattern he repeated with his mother. The loneliness. God, the loneliness. He lived in a 3,000 square foot apartment on the Upper East Side. Alone. With a housekeeper, a cook, and a driver who were paid to be there. Not to care about him. The nights were long. The early hours unbearable. He'd lie in bed and the silence screamed. And in that silence, his mother's voice came back. Next month, son. Next month. Next month. And he couldn't stand that voice anymore. Couldn't stand the notebook. Couldn't stand the empty house with a yard and a pool that nobody ever used. Couldn't stand the success that cost him everything that mattered. So on that Tuesday, he got up, put on the suit, because even to die, Richard Mendez was methodical, left a letter on the table, dismissed the driver, dismissed the security, and walked out. Walking to Penn Station. Because he wanted to be in the last place his mother was alive. He wanted the last place he'd see to be the same one. A kind of macabre symmetry. A billionaire dying on the same ground where his mother died selling candy for $1. And he was there. Standing on the corner. Looking at the place where Tsida collapsed 10 years earlier. Chest heavy, hands cold, decision made. And then? Candy, sir? Fudge, caramel, coconut. Everything's $1.50. Teresa's voice cut through the silence like a scalpel. Richard turned his head. And saw her. With the cooler. In the same spot. With his mother's same smile. And something happened. Something he can't explain, and I won't try to either. Something that has no name in any language I know. He looked at that woman and the plan just vanished. It wasn't reason. It wasn't logic. It wasn't fear. It was as if the universe, or God, or chance, or whatever you want to call it, had placed that woman on that corner at that exact moment to say, not yet. Not yet. There's something you need to do first. And Richard bought a piece of fudge. Put it in his mouth. And for the first time in years, he tasted something. Not the chocolate. Not the sugar. He tasted childhood. His mother's hand. The small kitchen. The old stove. The life he'd lost. And he cried. Right there. On the sidewalk. In front of everyone. And nobody noticed. Because in a big city nobody looks at anybody. Nobody. Except Teresa. Teresa looked. Teresa saw a man in a suit crying while holding a piece of fudge. And instead of pretending she didn't see, like everyone else would, she said, "Sir, are you okay? Are you okay?" 3 words. 3 words that saved a billionaire's life. Because nobody had asked Richard that in months. Maybe years. Nobody asks the billionaire if he's okay. Because billionaires have everything, right? Billionaires don't suffer. Billionaires don't cry. Billionaires don't feel loneliness. Billionaires don't think about giving up. Billionaires are strong. Always. What a disgusting lie. Richard looked at Teresa. And said, yeah. He lied. Like he lied to everyone. Your candy is really good, he said, wiping his eyes. Thank you, she said. I know it is. And she gave him a smile. Tsida's smile. And Richard came back the next day. Not because of some master plan. Not because he had a business strategy. He came back because that woman asked if he was okay. He came back because for 30 seconds, standing in front of her, he wasn't the billionaire. Wasn't the CEO. Wasn't the Forbes man. He was just a guy buying candy. And that, being just a guy buying candy, was the most liberating thing he'd felt in decades. So he came back. Every day. And with each day, the thought of killing himself moved further away. Not because the pain disappeared. The pain was still there. But because now there was something stronger than the pain. There was purpose. Teresa, without knowing any of this, gave Richard purpose. She was his second chance. His second chance to not be late. To not postpone. To not lose. And when he made the job offer, it wasn't just about corporate catering. It was about saving himself. Because by getting Teresa off the street, he was saving himself from the void. Beautiful, isn't it? It is. But the part that truly breaks you, the part that's going to haunt you, is what happened next. 2 years had passed since Teresa joined Mendez Capital. The catering project had become its own company. Annual revenue of $12 million. Teresa was a director. The woman who didn't know what a KPI was now managed a budget worth millions. Miguel was in a good private school. Getting excellent grades. Taking drawing classes. And he still carried the notebook, a new one now, nice, with a hard cover. And the drawings continued. But now, under the houses, he no longer wrote, Mom's house. He wrote, the house I'm going to build. Teresa and Richard had a relationship that was hard to define. It wasn't romance, never was, never would be. It wasn't ordinary friendship, it was too deep for that. It was something like chosen family. He had lunch with her every Friday. Always in the office kitchen. She'd make fudge, the 70% dark chocolate with espresso kind. And they'd talk. About everything. About their kids. About the past. About fear. About the future. About the things we get wrong and how sometimes getting it wrong is the path to getting it right later. And at one of those Friday lunches, Richard said, "Teresa, I want to give you something." He pulled an envelope from his pocket. Teresa opened it. Inside was a deed. A property deed. "What is this?" "It's the house." Teresa read the address. Read the description. And when she got to the part that said, property with yard and swimming pool, she looked up. "Richard, this is the house I bought for my mother." "Yes. I can't accept this." "You can." "Richard, it's a house. A huge house. This is worth. It doesn't matter what it's worth. What matters is what it's for. And that house sitting there empty, reminding me every day of what I lost, serves no purpose. But for you and Miguel, for you two it becomes what it was always meant to be. A home." Teresa held the deed with both hands. Shaking. "I built that house for a mother who sold candy on the street her whole life so she could give her son a future. I couldn't give it to my mother. But I can give it to you. And when I look at that house and know that someone is living in it, that a boy is drawing in the living room, that there's a smell of fudge coming from the kitchen, I'll finally be able to sleep in peace." Teresa cried. Again. But this time it was different. It wasn't tears of pain. It wasn't tears of relief. It was the cry of someone who finally understands that life isn't a straight line. That sometimes the worst thing that happens to you is the path to the best thing that happens to someone else. That the pain of Richard losing his mother created the path for Teresa to gain a life. And Teresa's smile saved Richard's life. They saved each other. Without knowing. Without planning. Without arranging it. Two strangers. A candy vendor and a billionaire. Connected by a street corner, a cooler, and a child's notebook full of house drawings. But I said this story had a devastating twist. And maybe you're thinking, but the twist already happened. Richard wanted to kill himself. No. That's not the twist. The twist is what I'm about to tell you now. And pay attention, because this changes everything. Remember Richard's notebook? The old notebook his mother kept? When Teresa moved into the house, she found the notebook in a box Richard had left there. He'd asked her to keep it. Teresa put it on a shelf. And didn't touch it again. Until one day, Miguel, now 10 years old, found the notebook. And opened it. And started flipping through the drawings. Houses. Big houses. With yards, pools, garages. And under each one, in a child's handwriting, Mom's house. Miguel looked at it and recognized it. It was him. It was his notebook. I mean, it wasn't his, it was Richard's. But it was the same thing. The same dream. The same boy. Separated by 40 years. And then Miguel turned to a page Teresa had never seen. A page near the end of the notebook. And it didn't have a drawing of a house. It had a letter. A letter written by Tsida. In the shaky handwriting of someone who didn't go to school for very long. She had written this letter inside her son's notebook, probably knowing that one day he'd find it. And the letter said, "Son, if you're reading this, it's because I'm already gone. I want you to know something I could never say looking you in the eyes. I don't sell candy because I have to. I mean, I do have to. But that's not the only reason. I sell candy because every piece I make thinking of you. Every piece of fudge is a prayer for you to be happy. Every caramel chew is a kiss I wish I could give you but you're far away working. Every coconut cluster is a memory of the day you were born and I knew my life had meaning. You don't need to give me a house, son. You don't need to give me anything. You already gave me everything the day you were born. The house I want isn't made of bricks. The house I want is you being close to me. But I know you need to go. I know you have a long road to walk. And I'll stay here, on my corner, making my candy and waiting for you to come back. Because mothers wait, son. Mothers always wait. No matter how long. No matter the distance. Mothers wait. And when you come back, I'll be here. With a piece of fudge for you. The way you like it. Without sprinkles, with a little extra chocolate. Just the way you like it. I love you bigger than the world. And then a little more. Mom. Miguel read the letter out loud. And Teresa, who was in the kitchen, heard it. And when she came into the living room, she found her son holding the notebook, crying. She read the letter. And cried with him. And that night, Teresa did something she'd never done. She called Richard. At 11 at night. And said, Richard, there's something here you need to see. In the notebook. Your mother wrote something. Silence on the other end of the line. Can you come tomorrow? Richard didn't come tomorrow. He came right then. Midnight. Rang the doorbell of the house he'd built, the house he'd given away, the house that should have been his mother's. Teresa opened the door. Handed him the notebook open to the page with the letter. Richard read it. Standing up. In the living room. With Teresa and Miguel watching. And when he finished, he closed the notebook. Pressed it against his chest. And said a single sentence. She knew. She knew. Tsida knew her son was pulling away. Knew he was choosing work. Knew he carried the guilt of not being present. Knew everything. And even so, she didn't demand. Didn't complain. Didn't guilt trip him. She wrote a letter saying, the house I want is you being close to me. And then she tucked that letter inside her son's notebook of drawings, the notebook where the boy drew houses for her, like a secret message that would only be found at the right moment. And the right moment was this one. Not when Richard was rich and powerful and could have bought 1,000 houses. Not when Richard was destroyed and thinking of ending it all. The right moment was when a 10-year-old boy, who drew houses in a notebook exactly like Richard once did, found the letter. In the house Richard gave to Teresa. The house that was supposed to be Tsida's. Pay attention to the chain of events. Tsida sold candy to raise Richard. Richard grew up, got rich, and couldn't give his mother the house before she died. He carried the guilt for years. Wanted to end his life. Found Teresa selling candy in the same spot. Teresa saved his life without knowing it. He gave Teresa a new life. Gave his mother's house to Teresa. And Teresa's son, the boy who drew houses in a notebook, found the message Tsida had left behind. The message that finally freed Richard from the guilt. 40 years. 3 generations. A cooler. A notebook of drawings. And a hidden letter that told the truth Richard needed to hear his whole life. His mother never wanted the house. His mother just wanted him close. And now think about this with me. How many times have you walked past someone on the street and not looked? How many times have you seen a person selling something at a traffic light and turned your eyes away? How many times have you judged someone by their clothes, their job, their address? How many times have you assumed you knew someone's story just by looking at them? Teresa was just a candy vendor. But she saved a billionaire's life with 3 words, "Are you okay?" Richard was just a billionaire. But he carried a pain that all the money in the world couldn't cure. Miguel was just an 8-year-old boy with a beat-up notebook. But his drawings were exactly the same as those of a boy 40 years earlier who became one of the richest men in America. And Tsida was just a woman who sold candy on the street. But she left hidden in her son's notebook a message that, decades later, would be found by another child, in another house, in another time, and would finally bring peace to the heart of a man who spent his entire life trying to pay a debt that never existed. Because it wasn't a debt. It was love. And love doesn't keep tabs. Love doesn't do math. Love doesn't demand a house with a pool. Love says, "I'll be right here, With a piece of fudge for you. The way you like it. Without sprinkles, with a little extra chocolate. Teresa didn't know any of this when she accepted Richard's offer. She thought she was accepting a job. In reality, she was stepping into a story that began long before her, and that won't end with her. Because Miguel, now 10 years old, carries 2 notebooks. His own and Richard's. And he doesn't draw houses anymore. He draws people. People on the street. People selling things. People nobody looks at. And under each drawing, he writes, "I see you. I see you." That's what the world needs. Not billionaires saving candy vendors. Not pretty stories to go viral on the internet. The world needs people who look. Who stop. Who ask, "Are you okay?" Who see the person where everyone else just sees the obstacle. Richard almost died because nobody asked if he was okay. Teresa was invisible because nobody looked at her. Tsida died on a sidewalk and people probably stepped right over her with the same rush they used to walk past her candy. We live in a city, in a world, where we cross paths with hundreds of people every day and see none of them. Don't see. Don't want to see. Because seeing takes effort. Seeing requires empathy. Seeing means stopping, even for just 3 seconds, and recognizing that the person standing right in front of you has a story as complex, as painful, as beautiful as your own. And we don't want to do that. Because it's easier to walk past. Easier to look away. Easier to pretend the world ends at our own navel. But when we walk past, we lose. We lose the chance to find a Richard who needs someone to ask if he's okay. We lose the chance to find a Teresa who just needs someone to look. We lose the chance to find a Tsida who has a hidden message waiting to be discovered. Today, Teresa lives in the house with the yard and the pool. Miguel swims in the pool every weekend. Richard has dinner there every Friday. Fudge made with 70% dark chocolate and espresso. Teresa's way. And the way Tsida used to make it for Richard when he was a kid. Without sprinkles. With a little extra chocolate. Richard made peace with his children. Sold one of the companies. Slowed down. Started being present, not because someone told him to, but because he finally understood that the greatest present is presence. And every Tuesday in March, that gray Tuesday that is the anniversary of everything, Richard goes to the subway station. Not to cry anymore. Not to say goodbye. He goes to buy candy. From whoever's they're selling. Buys everything. Pays $100 for every piece of $1.50 candy. And when the person looks startled and says, "Sir, I don't have change," he answers the same thing, "Don't need change." Because somewhere in that rushing crowd, there might be another Teresa. And there might be another Richard. And if the two of them meet, if someone stops for 3 seconds and asks, "Are you okay?" the story repeats itself. Again. And again. And again. And maybe one day, when we learn to look, we won't need plot twists to understand a truth that should have been obvious from the start. Every human being who crosses your path is carrying a war you know nothing about. Every single one. No exception. The billionaire. The candy vendor. The boy with the notebook. The mother who died on a sidewalk. Everyone carries something. And the only thing that separates a happy ending from a tragedy, is someone who stopped to look. So the next time you walk past someone on the street, stop. Look. Ask. Because you might be the piece of fudge in someone's life. You might be the question that saves. You might be the hand that holds. And if you think that's an exaggeration, remember Teresa. She didn't know she was saving anyone. She just offered a piece of candy. Candy, sir? Fudge, caramel, coconut. Everything's $1.50. And changed 2 lives forever.